I don't know if debate is the correct word to use here, but there is active conversation in the anatomical community as to whether or not the quads, the quadriceps, are one muscle or four individual muscles. Like if I'm in the classroom and I'm teaching this, I will treat this as four individual muscles. I'll talk about it as like, okay, you have the vastus lateralis, here's its origin, insertion, and function, the vastus medialis, so on and so forth. Yet, if you are to look in pretty much any anatomical text, you're going to see this listed, and in fact, we do this here on our very own website as the quadriceps femoris muscle. And so the question that a lot of people are asking is why? Why treat it sometimes as four individual muscles and other times treat it as one muscle? I mean, like we don't really do that for biceps, for example, right? So for biceps brachii, we treat it as one muscle with two heads. But with quadriceps, we just kind of approach it a little bit differently. And to answer that question like as accurately as possible, we'd have to really dive into the nuances of how this is innervated, how the tension is generated with this muscle. You know, what are its embryological development and its origin? Like, where is it coming from? There's a lot of nuances to kind of really parse that conversation. However, I do think this really is one muscle. And here's the justification that pretty much any anatomist would give you. It has to do with its insertion, right? Because if we look at this area here, this is what is called the patellar ligament. The patellar ligament is the dense connective tissue that emerges from the patella and then connects to the bump on the front of your shin. So if you go down and feel that right now, that is called the tibial tuberosity. And what happens is all four quadriceps, which we can see three of them right here. The fourth one is deep. And actually, you could even say there's 5 or 6 muscles. I know that sounds kind of weird that could belong into the quadriceps femoris. But regardless, all of them are going to blend into this other piece of connective tissue right above it called the quadriceps tendon. So we have the rectus femoris, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and then deep down is something called the vastus intermedius. All four of them have this giant, connection point where they blend into the patella, and then the patellar ligament emerges from it, and all four of them are inserting at the tibial tuberosity. And so when you look at it from this perspective, it's like, oh, that is one big muscle. In fact, like if you were to dissect this out, let's say like you cut away the origins for all four of these muscles, like it is. It's just like this giant, it's not a tripod, it's like a quadrupod. Is that a thing? It's probably a thing. But like it splays out like this, and it's really cool to see that way, and you just get this sense like, oh, this is a massive muscle. I mean, honestly, if you approach this as being one individual muscle, this is the largest muscle in the human body. I mean, there's like no comparison. I mean, it's traveling from your lower leg, right, your crus, all the way up to your hip. Now, granted, all four of the muscles don't go up to the hip or cross the hip joint, but one of them does. And so when you put that together, this is a massive, massive muscle. And so what I want to do is, now that we kind of have some context and perspective around the quadriceps femoris, I want to though look at each individual head, and we're just going to be very brief with it. We're going to kind of get some kind of understanding of what's going on with it. And by the way, I'm using a 100% free Kenhub article that we're going to go ahead and leave a link down in the description below. You're welcome to follow along with me. I think it's a lot easier that way. You can kind of navigate this. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through these one by one. These heads to the muscle, what we call the quadriceps femoris. And the first one is what's called the rectus femoris. Now, rectus just means straight. So you see it in rectus abdominis, for example, or the rectum. So the rectus femoris is actually the longest of the quadriceps muscles. And what's interesting about this muscle is you can feel this on your own. So what I encourage you to do, and you can't really see me doing this because it's underneath my desk, but I encourage you to extend your knee, right? So like your whole knee is just kind of extended. So flexed would be this position, then this would be the extended position. And when you do that, I want you to just relax your thigh. And if you grab your hands, I want you to rest them on either side of your thigh, and you can push, and you're going to feel a muscle just sliding from side to side. That's the rectus femoris. The reason why rectus femoris is so mobile is because it doesn't attach to the femur at all. In fact, it comes all the way up here. And again, this is the only of the quadricep muscles or heads of the muscle that actually crosses the hip joint and originates all the way up here. It's what's called the anterior inferior iliac spine. We're not really getting too bogged down in its attachments, just understanding it doesn't attach to the femur at all. Now, what's fascinating about that is you see the same exact relationship happening in biceps brachii up in your arm, in your upper limb. Biceps attaches to the scapula, and then it comes down and attaches to the radius. It doesn't anchor itself to the humerus at all. So if you can move your biceps brachii around, it's just flipping and flopping all over the place. And you can do the exact same thing with rectus femoris. But rectus femoris, because it is actually going to cross two different joints. It crosses the knee joint and it crosses the hip joint. That means it has two different actions. And so the first action is going to be flexion of the hip. But then its second action is going to be extension of the knee. And so the best way you can probably wrap your mind around this would be kind of like thinking like a ballerina, or possibly like in American football, you know, like that punter. Like I always think of like this punter just punting the ball. Their leg is straight, right? So the knee is extended, but the hip is flexing. So you get this very straight-legged kick. That's exactly what the rectus femoris is going to do, right? But that's not the case for the other one. So if we go down, we can now see a muscle called the vastus medialis. And that's this one here. And what's happened in this image is we've removed the rectus femoris so we can get a better understanding of the vastus medialis. This is commonly described as a teardrop-shaped muscle. And what it does is, or rather what it doesn't do, is cross the hip joint. So what you can't see from this particular image is that the vastus medialis wraps around and actually originates on the posterior aspect of the femur. It originates at something called the linea aspera, which is like the sharp ridge line on the back of the femur. But then it wraps around, and what's really interesting is down at this distal end, the fibers, they go almost horizontally. And so then it like gets this really oblique angle, and then you can see it starting to merge into that quadriceps tendon, which is again, you know, this dense piece of connective tissue that you can see right there. But since it doesn't cross the hip, it doesn't have an action at the hip. And instead, the only action that we have for vastus medialis is extension of the knee. Again, so it's like you're kicking a ball. So think just like your knees in the flexed position. Like right now I'm in my chair, my knees are in the flexed position, but if I were to extend my knee like I was kicking a ball, that's exactly what vastus medialis is going to do. It has no action at the hip. And in fact, that is going to remain true for the rest of the quadricep muscles, right? So you have the vastus lateralis here. And again, vastus just means large, and then medialis meant that it was on the medial side. Lateralis means that it's on the lateral side. And this image does not do it justice because, in fact, I wonder if we have a different view. You can see a little bit more of it. You can see just how the vastus lateralis is enormous. What I encourage you to do is make like a C shape or cupping shape with your hand, and I want you to go ahead and just put that on the lateral side of your thigh. Almost everything you're feeling there is the vastus lateralis. This is a massive, massive muscle. And it, just like the vastus medialis, is originating on the posterior side of the femur. It originates on that linea aspera. It just wraps around and does the exact same thing, inserting into the quadriceps tendon and the patella, and then going to the patellar ligament into the tibial tuberosity. My point is, it doesn't cross the hip either. Let's go back, actually. It doesn't cross. The hip is right here. So it gets close. It goes all the way up towards that, what's called the greater trochanter, which is like this massive piece of bone of your femur that's just kind of projecting to the side. But this does not cross the hip joint at all. Instead, it is only extending the knee. So now we have three muscles extending the knee, right? Because it's inserting in that tibial tuberosity. But it's just approaching it on the lateral side, which gives it a different amount of leverage. And then if we keep on going, we meet what's called the vastus intermedius. And vastus intermedius, I want you to understand, again, we've had to remove the rectus femoris. It's deep to rectus femoris. In order to get to the vastus intermedius, you'd kind of have to shove it to the side. Now, if you wanted to touch it, I encourage you to, but I also encourage you to be gentle because you don't want to hurt yourself. You can slide rectus femoris to the side. You can kind of push it laterally, and then with your fingers, you could actually kind of sort of palpate directly this muscle. Not a lot of it. I don't want to make it seem like you're going to be able to feel the entire length of it, but you can actually directly touch this muscle through your integumentary system. But once again, it doesn't cross the hip. It gets close. It goes all the way up towards that greater trochanter again. But this thing is anchored to the entire anterior and lateral. It's like the anterolateral shaft of the femur. And then again, it blends into the quadriceps tendon, patella, patellar ligament, into the tibial tuberosity, meaning this muscle only extends the knee. All right, so we have 4 muscles here that are all extending the knee with only one of them flexing the hip. And so you're starting to probably get an understanding of why these muscle, or I guess we should just say these muscle heads, can be considered one individual muscle. They're all going to the same place. They're all going to have the same innervation from the femoral nerve, right? These things are all, these muscle heads are all working together for a very specific action. You might be wondering, well, why do you need so many muscles doing that? Well, it really comes down to, and I can go like this, locomotion. Right? If you think about walking, running, right? That's what humans are built for. That's what we're best at, is actually long distance running. We're one of the best, if not the best on the entire planet at long distance running. Doesn't mean we're very fast, we're not very strong, but man, can we move our feet. I mean, we're the only creatures that I'm aware of, at least, that like to actually casually go for a run. And so that action, we're really good at it. We're very precise with it, and we need to be able to perform it very well. And so we have, and by the way, the quadriceps femoris is not the only muscle dedicated to locomotion. In fact, pretty much every muscle in your body is impacting it in some capacity. It's just you need to be able to very quickly extend your knee to be able to land at the exact moment you need to, so you don't tumble. Because running and walking, as much as we're built for it, at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of weight above the knee, and you can topple, right? You can fall, and you can get hurt. I mean, you can hit your head. So you need to be able to execute these actions very precisely and very consistently. And so we have these massive muscles that are just quickly able to extend the knee, make sure the foot lands where it needs to land, and then therefore you don't have to really worry too much about it. But right, so this is the quadriceps. I mean, like, my hope is that you have some understanding of why we have the quadriceps, and also, is it 1 muscle versus 4 muscles? I'll leave that up to you to really kind of like think about it, but again, anatomists would say that it's going to be 1 muscle. But hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Remember, there is a link down in the description below. You can read through this article and check out everything that I showed you today, absolutely free of charge. But while you're down there, why don't you go ahead and like this video? You feel free to leave us a comment letting us know what you'd like to see in future videos. We're always aiming to do better, and we want to talk about things that you want to learn about, and there's way too much in the human body for us to figure out on our own. So please help us, guide us, tell us what you want to learn. But regardless, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you next time.